Welcome to Mind and Soul Matters. We're delighted to share with you again another special presentation from a live forum. It is part of a series of live talks organised in collaboration between Mind and Soul Matters and Melville Baha'i Community to discuss issues around mental health in our society. I will leave the introduction of our presenter to Dr. Dina Ashurian, MC of the forum.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dina, and I'll be the MC for this afternoon's program. I'd like to acknowledge that we're meeting on Noongar land today, and to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land and to the elders, past and present, and to pay my respects to their culture. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of background on family and domestic violence. Domestic violence remains a significant and deeply concerning issue in Australia, affecting individuals from all ages, genders, and cultural backgrounds. It encompasses physical, emotional, psychological, sexual, and financial abuse. Domestic violence not only causes an incredible amount of personal trauma, but also has wide-ranging social and economical impacts, contributing to homelessness, mental health issues, and places a heavy burden on the health and justice systems. This complex issue requires a coordinated, whole-of-community response that includes education, early intervention, accessible support services, and sustained government commitment to prevention and justice reform. I'd like to share a personal anecdote. As many of you know, these forums take months to organize. And whilst we were in the planning stages for this particular one, I was called to jury duty. And it so happened to be a case involving domestic violence. The synchronicity was striking. It was almost as if it was validating the importance of this event and to help me understand it better than just simply researching the topic. Serving as a juror on this case gave me a powerful and personal insight into the devastating impact that this abuse can have on both the partner and the children involved. While I was aware of domestic violence as a significant issue, hearing firsthand accounts and seeing the emotional toll it took on the family brought a whole new level of understanding and empathy for me. It revealed the complexity of these situations, the fear, the silence, the lasting trauma, and how it affects every aspect of a victim's life. This experience has shifted my perspective and deepened my commitment to supporting efforts to educate the community about the impact and resources available to those affected. Our next speaker might be a familiar face to some of you. Our next speaker is Ms. Fiona McDonald. Fiona has said that the principles of the Baha'i faith have been a guiding compass for her since she became a Baha'i at the age of 20. The principle of equality of men and women is important to her, and working towards that is something she is passionate about. Having worked in an agency, Relationships Australia, where much work was done to try and support both the survivors and the perpetrators of family and domestic violence, she saw the damage that it can create. Therefore, the area she worked in was the preventative side. Relationship education, trying to break the cycle through education, raising awareness and building skills and understanding of young couples getting married and people in committed relationships to learn to do things differently. Fiona served on a national Baha'i institution for over 30 years and continues to assist local Baha'i institutions in relation to family and domestic violence and coercive control, so that they are better able to recognize, to respond appropriately, and to refer people to the relevant agencies for assistance. So please welcome Fiona now.
Thank you, Dina. I think she just gave my talk. Thanks so much. And as Dina said, that one of the primary principles of the Baha'i faith is the equality of men and women. And this is a real challenge that we have establishing this principle, because there are those who disagree with that, and therefore there's denial and resistance. or they just don't know how to do it differently. So for those working towards this, what happens when there has been an imbalance of power, as has already been discussed, in any relationship? How do we redress this imbalance? I think in society today we're still learning what this equality of men and women looks like, or women and men looks like. I think we're still really learning about it, and in many ways I always think it's quite good to be very open to the notion that we don't actually know what it looks like, because if we have a rigid idea of what it looks like, it may not be quite the way it looks like that. But I do believe that we've advanced our understanding of what a relationship, an intimate relationship, could look like. What are the things that could look like? And that's a relationship that should be based on both having a say in the decision-making, respect is shown by both, care and kindness are features of such a relationship, loyalty, faithfulness, and so on. That give and take in a relationship. So I have a letter from the House of Justice that many of you know about, and I will quote a few things out of it as we go through. And the House of Justice, letter was written just in March this year, so it's very recent. And the governing body of the Baha'i world, which we call the Universal House of Justice, they wrote this. It says, in the Baha'i family, the married couple are true partners. One is not subordinate to the other. Together, they navigate life's challenges. So that's really the underlying principle. So when there is an imbalance of power, and we're dealing with a person who is using coercive control over another person, very well outlined by Jane as she talked about that, what steps can be taken, and how should we approach such a situation? Now, no behavior around coercive control is acceptable. I think we all know that. We all accept that. And sometimes this behavior has dire consequences, as we have heard. But we must still treat people with respect whilst letting them know the behavior isn't at all acceptable. This requires much patience when re-educating, which can take a very long time. And as from working at Relationships Australia, they had programs for half a year. And of course, there's also got to be a willingness to participate in that. At times, people recognise this isn't the right way to behave, but they haven't learned how to do it differently. Naturally, for those who don't recognise it or agree with that, then strong boundaries are needed, and we know all about that. In the vast majority of cases, domestic violence in adult relationships is perpetrated by a male against a female. However, men can also be victims of domestic violence. I think we all know that. So, what to do about that? There is often a debate around perpetrators should be referred to anger management programs, and Jane referred to that as well. And a similar debate exists on whether couples who counselling is also appropriate, and of course the answer really is no. So I want to just say a few words about anger. You may well know that anger, there's two types of anger. There's proactive anger and there's reactive anger. Reactive anger is when somebody says something to somebody does something, and then we react. And we often know that as having a short fuse or just losing it or whatever. And so we get angry, and that can take many forms. Proactive is a more controlled anger, and intentional and at times planned anger. So I'll just read what the literature says. It says reactive aggression is defensive, retaliatory, and in response to real or perceived provocation. Proactive aggression, on the other hand, is displayed to reach a goal, whether that goal involves material or territorial gain or social dominance. So therefore, just sending a person to anger management is not helpful. That's not to say anger management skills are not useful, and I'll come to that in a minute. But with anger management, obviously the first step is to teach somebody to pause before they react. So they learn to respond rather than react. But then you also have to give them skills in the awareness and appropriate expression of anger and other emotions. Communication skills, conflict resolution skills, and stress management. Those are the kind of things that if somebody has a short fuse, you engage with them and then you try and teach them those things. Now, when it comes to domestic violence or family and domestic violence, coercive control, first of all, when a person presents with that, there has to be an examination of societal and personal beliefs that support violence. We have to look at it from that perspective. There has to be a change in the perpetrator's belief systems which support the use of violence in intimate relationships. Identification of types of abuse, which we've heard about earlier. Perpetrator held accountable for all abusive behaviours. Challenging of denial, minimisation, and victim blaming. Empathy building, understanding the impact of violence and abuse on the family and often on children, causes great trauma. Non-violent, non-controlling relationship skills, and all the skills that I mentioned about anger management. These are the things that one works with, but it is a change of belief system that has to take place. There is a difference between verbal abuse and argument and conflict. Abuse is differentiated from arguments or marital conflict by the presence of a power differential. If two individuals with equal power in a relationship disagree or even argue about the matter, it is not the same as an individual using their power to silence, coerce, control, or otherwise harm the other individual. And some of that can get quite out of hand, but there isn't that fear. A heated exchange of views is different from using words or actions to assert power and control. If one partner is afraid of another partner due to their coercive behaviour, which impacts on their own behaviour, then they are a victim of family and domestic violence. As Dina said, I am involved in assisting the Baha'i community, primarily through its institutions, to help them not only to recognise, respond appropriately and refer into coercive control, but how to educate people. Often people don't realise that what they're actually experiencing or doing is actually coercive control, because people, as we all know, people tend to think unless there are bruises and broken legs and everything there, it isn't coercive control. And people don't always realise that it can come over, as was said, being caring, over-caring, and so on. Just a couple of words about the legal and the law is that for the first time in history, there is now a wide-ranging legal definition of domestic abuse, which goes beyond physical violence, as we've heard. Controlling or coercive behaviour, which happens post-separation, will also be counted as abuse, and this has come into law May 2024, but not every state has that. But my understanding is that in the past, police were unable to arrest a person if the victim or survivor didn't press charges. However, the law has changed to allow police to arrest someone even if no charges have been pressed by the victim survivor. So responses in other jurisdictions internationally, in the UK, England has had coercive control as being illegal for 10 years, 2015. The other countries in the UK followed suit over the last few years after that. And in Australia, different states are at different places. At this stage, only 2 states, New South Wales and Queensland, have criminalised these behaviours implicitly, and the coercive control laws in Western Australia, in November 2023, the government announced that it would take a phased approach to criminalising coercive control. The first step would be to have thorough reforming of the restraining orders, act and implementing training for police officers and educators. So that's where we're at the moment. So how do we break the cycle of abuse? This is really how do we actually break it? And going back to what we were talking about earlier, about the equality of men and women, I believe very much that we need to start by strengthening the family. The family is the place where we need to really work. There's a need for education, as Dina said earlier in my introduction, that awareness that things can be done differently and need to be done differently. Education as well that is accessible, affordable, and not seen as a failure when seeking to help to build knowledge, skills, and understanding of how to do things differently. And from that same letter, I want to quote again that the House of Justice spoke about. They said, "It is within the family that the individual is born and nurtured, and within the family that individuals begin to learn how to live together with others. The family unit is the basic building block of community and beyond of the entire social order. Therefore, a society fashioned to meet the requirements of the age of maturity of the human race requires both a mature conception of family and an ability to extend the insights derived from that conception to the relationships that shape the nation and the world. A family is a nation in miniature. The conditions surrounding the family surround the nation." So this is not to blame parents who have been doing their best with the awareness they have. But they're often, they've been taught or not taught, and so we must never blame people. But we have to help people to learn to do things differently and not repeat the patterns of the past. As was said, I worked in the preventative area for both in Anglicare actually first and then with Relationships Australia for over 25 years, offering such programs as pre-marriage education, couples enrichment programs, parenting programs, as well as individual programs such as anger management, effective communication, self-worth. One of the debates we always had was, when is it best to engage with people to help to break any patterns or to educate, whatever? And so, pre-marriage is always a good time, before there's a commitment, before they're married, before they have children. The only challenge, of course, is that people who are getting married have already been brought up in a family. They've already been influenced. They've already had, both positive and negative influences in their lives. So the other debate then is, should we go to schools? Should we talk to youth? Should we, talk to help them to look at what healthy relationships? And that I know has been happening. There have been trials done. There have been different programs they've done. But I'm not sure what the results are. And one of the biggest challenges with the preventative work that I worked in is longitudinal studies to actually prove that what we do beforehand has an effect. And the correlation between those things. It's very hard to do. However, I believe it's an ongoing process, and I think it is really important that the strengthening of the families and recognising, in fact, I read an article a few weeks ago where in the Australian where they were talking about it's a long time since the government has had any policies around the strengthening of the family. And I think this is something that really needs plenty of attention. As we know, the more we strengthen the family, the less trauma is caused. And of course, as has been already said, it saves millions if we can strengthen the family. So I'd like to finish with another quote from this letter that I have already quoted from. It says, "The sound relationships that are to bind members of a Baha'i family are based on justice and reciprocity. Each member must receive the rights due. Each member must fulfill the responsibility owed. According to the teachings of Baha'u'llah, the family, being a human unit, must be educated according to the rules of sanctity. The integrity of the family bond must be constantly considered, and the rights of the individual members must not be transgressed. These sound relationships among family members require conscious cultivation. They require conscious cultivation." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fiona. There was so much in that 10, 15 minutes, but thank you so much for the information you shared and really bringing it back to the family that, I think there is a lot of importance placed on the family unit and mothers and fathers and how we raise our children to be future family, having their own families and the impact that they have learning from them. I personally have learned so much, and I'm sure all of you have as well. A big thank you to the Baha'i community of Melville for hosting. A big thank you to our expert panelists who have educated us immensely today. And a thank you to our AV assistant at the back who has helped us with sound and audio recording. And also a thank you to the Mental Health Forum's organizing task force.
If today's episode has raised any concerns for you, please reach out to your local mental health service and your support network. For those in Australia, please contact Lifeline on 13 11 14. If you found today's episode useful, remember to share an episode with a friend and follow Mind and Soul Matters on your preferred podcast platform and on social media. Look forward to your company next time on Mind and Soul Matters.